from the Thoughtful Gardener. We're going to talk a little bit about nativars, native plants, and cultivars. What's the difference between a nativar and a cultivar, and why does it matter? This is a Joe Pye weed. It's approximately 6 feet tall, a good head taller than I am. And you can see how stunningly beautiful it is. It's early in the morning here. It's a little chilly today, which is really nice for August 1st. But you can see that it has tons of blooms. It'll be a long blooming perennial here in the garden. It grows quote unquote like a weed. I don't mind that. I like perennials that spread. That gives me an opportunity to share more with friends and other gardeners. But it is well loved by pollinators, and so it is a staple in this garden. But you can see how tall it is, and some people don't like that. Some people don't like the fact that it gets this tall. That's okay. So we then have something called a nativar. So this is a native Joe Pye weed. I'm going to show you what a nativar is. Nativar is designed to be slightly different than the parent plant. So a Joe Pye weed typically gets around 7 feet tall. This one's a good 6 feet plus at the moment. The nativar of the Joe Pye weed is just over here, so I'm going to walk you down. You can see we've already got pollinators here in the garden. That purple flower, if you're wondering, is what's called lavender highstop. I find that the bees just love it. It's a member of the mint family, and you can make tea out of it. So this is a nativar. This is little Joe Pye weed. You can see based on its cousin over there, all that has been done to this plant is to make it slightly shorter. So this one only gets about 4 feet tall. So it's definitely a lot shorter than the one I just showed you. But because the only thing that's been impacted is the height, your pollinators will still use this plant, and it still provides significant value in the garden. So affecting the height of a plant doesn't seem to bother the pollinator. But let's talk about cultivars, and we're going to have to go for a walk. So I will join you in just a minute to show you a cultivar Joe Pye weed. So this is a cultivar Joe Pye weed. Now cultivars have specifically been manipulated, typically in the color of the bloom or in the leaf. In this case, the bloom looks very similar, but the leaf has been made variegated. Now, why should you care? The challenge with cultivars is they're not highly desired by our native pollinators. In fact, I don't see any pollinators on this plant ever. And that is my frustration with cultivars. I think that as natives continue to gain popularity, growers want to create plants that the public will find a little more interesting. I find this very interesting, but I also realize after buying them and planting them that their interest really is for me and not for pollinators. And when I'm planting plants, I want to do things that are multi-valuable to both me and pollinators. So this is pretty. It's going to make a gorgeous cut flower with that variegation. It adds interest to this garden. But, and this is the but, it adds no value whatsoever to pollinators. So I just want you to be aware when you're looking for native plants, you're going to have to look hard for what's called a straight species. I am fine if you want to buy a nativar, which means that perhaps that Joe Pye weed's just too tall for your garden and you want little Joe. That's fine. The height doesn't seem to influence whether or not a pollinator will visit, but variegating or coloring the leaf or changing the flower color for whatever reason does not seem to add value to pollinators. And while it can be a great cut flower for you, you want to minimize its use if you're looking to include it in the pollinator garden. Garden thoughtfully and take care.